Welcome back to the Crisscross Corner. On today's episode, I will be giving you the meaning of Juneteenth. I will also be giving you my top 10 African American songs from the year 1980. Crisscross Corner starts now. Welcome to the Crisscross Corner. On today's episode, I will be talking to you about what Juneteenth is. Juneteenth, for anybody who doesn't know, is the oldest commemoration of the ending of slavery in the United States. Now, the Emancipation Proclamation, drafted up in I think 1862, was put into effect in 1863, freeing all the slaves, quote in quotes, because not all the slaves were free. Not everybody knew that they were free across the nation. I think it was 1980, it became a national holiday, quote unquote, in Texas, in Galveston, Texas. And Texas will be a key state throughout this whole show today. Because Texas is a very pivotal state in this whole Juneteenth slavery, Black Lives Matter movement that we're doing right now in 2020. Like I said, Juneteenth is the oldest commemoration of the ending of slavery in the United States, which was on June 19th, 1865, 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation that Abraham Lincoln signed to free the slaves. Now, slavery in America, not just the United States, has been an issue in, I believe, the 18th and 19th century, more prevalent in the 18th century, in the 1700s. And even before the 1700s, we were brought over, I believe, this 1600s, 1609, we were brought over to the United States. We've been being brought way before 1619, but the first United States, quote unquote, slaves were brought in the 1600s. And, generations later, people were like, oh, this is not good. We don't want slaves anymore. This is a bad thing. Sadly, United States was the last country in those big three, Mexico, Canada, United States, to actually end slavery in 1863. But, we'll get there. We will get there. We will get there. My phone was ringing. Mexico. Shockingly enough, Mexico was one of the first countries over here on this side of the Prime Meridian to stop slavery, to abolish slavery. Texas, we're going back to Texas. Texas was one of the first states to actually fight a whole country over if they should or should not have slaves. Because Mexico was just giving out land, like, here, bro. Here, man, take this land because we don't want it no more. All that stuff. And then Texas was like, all right, I'll bring my slaves out here too. Mexico was like, hold up. You can't have your slaves on this land if we give it to you. That's like one of their, one of their things that they said they couldn't have slaves on their property if they bought it. And then the people of Texas was like, all right, we're going to go to war with y'all over these slaves. And I don't think people in America know that the Battle of the Alamo was fought because of federalism and slaves and immigration. Okay. Ironically, immigration rights are still being fought over right now in 2020 in Texas, as well as other border states as we speak. But um, shocked by the rapidly rising rate of white immigration and disgusted by the use of slavery, the Mexican government started putting restrictions on people who would bring slaves into their properties that were given to them by the Mexicans. So the Battle of the Alamo was fought to stop slavery because Mexico abolished it. Canada also abolished it around the same time. But it was all about the cotton industry and money and all that stuff back in the mid 1800s. That was pretty much during the abolitionist movement as well in the United States. So then, of course, 19 or 18, I believe, keep on saying 19, 1861, the Civil War began in South Carolina because they wanted to get out of here and be like deuces. We're joining the Confederacy. The Civil War began, 4 years later, 1865, it was all done. Abraham Lincoln was like, all right, free the slaves. Many people did free their slaves. Unfortunately, people in Texas, they didn't know that they were free until the Union came and said, hey, guys, you guys are free. And that was in Galveston, Texas, June 19th, 1865. And that is why we celebrate Juneteenth, the actual day that everyone here in America, black or white, was essentially free. They were free. Freedom at last. Quote unquote. I'm going to keep saying that because there's more to come. Fast forward to 1980, January 1st, 1980. Juneteenth became an official state holiday in Texas, of all places. Yes, Texas. Through the efforts of Al Edwards, which was an African-American state legislator at the time, the successful passage of this bill marked Juneteenth as the first emancipation celebration granted official state recognition. So the recognition of Juneteenth was big in the black community at that time, especially in Texas. They had huge celebrations, they did parades and everything. But then, of course, things, happened after that. Classroom and textbooks don't really, highlight Juneteenth because, the people who write the books aren't, technically of African-American descent. So why should they? But classroom and textbook education in lieu of the traditional home and the family taught practices in youth, at the time, they didn't want to put the emphasis on the lives of slaves and black people, as well as indigenous and people who actually come to the country to make themselves better or to come to seek a new life, seek refuge, and all that stuff. They just focus on the good stuff. George Washington did that. Abraham Lincoln did that. FDR did that. World War II, we did this. 1980, we conquered this. Like, we know about that stuff, but we need to talk about all the history of America because African Americans built this country. Whether you like it or not, we built this country. And not surprisingly, but surprisingly enough, we're not highlighted, we're not praised for our work. And the movement right now, the Black Lives Matter movement, is actually helping us get the recognition that we deserve and what this holiday Juneteenth deserves, because Juneteenth is where everybody was free. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have to celebrate Independence Day. Independence Day is a great holiday. It signifies the independence from Great Britain. Great Britain was doing some stuff to us that we didn't like. We said, hey, we don't like what you're doing to us. We're going to go to war for our independence. Independence Day, I'm not against Independence Day because that's the day that, we got rid of all British rule in our country. If we didn't, we'd still be ruled by the British today. Sad but true. That was the first step of independence for all people. And then we had I keep on saying 19, but then we had 1863, Emancipation Proclamation, where the black man was given the rights that weren't given to them in 1776. Then we had 1865, where everyone that had no rights, no say in anything, got to be part of the country that they were brought to work for free. Now we get to earn money. Now we get to make families. Now we get to spend money. Now we get to build generational wealth and all that stuff for our families. We didn't get to do that before 1863 or 1865. But that's just the beginning. Let's go over this history of slavery in America, starting with 1776. Of course, 1776, Independence Day, the American Revolution. We had the triangle trade. We had the Atlantic slave trade, where it was banned during the American Revolution because all of our stuff that we cultivated went to Great Britain. So we was like, we ain't doing that, Great Britain. Forget y'all. So they seceded. We got out of there. We got our independence in 1776. Slavery was abolished in some places, but not all places. Vermont, 1777, bans slavery partially. They banned it partially. They freed men over 21 and women older than 18. But it wasn't enforced as much because, people need to work on the farms and all that stuff in Vermont. So they weren't really given their freedom. But for the record, Vermont was one of the first states to ban slavery. Then we have Russia, of all places. Russia abolished slavery in 1783. Then New Hampshire started abolishing slavery. Connecticut did it. Then we did Rhode Island. Then we did Australia also did some things to abolish slavery. They did the Northwest Ordinance in 1787, outlawing slavery in the new territories across America. So from the Appalachian Mountains west, there was supposed to be no slavery. They also did, let me check, the Slave Trade Act bans both American ships from participating in the slave trade. And that was in 1794. So slavery was already being abolished and said that it was wrong back in the 1700s. This was 100 years before the Emancipation Proclamation. But as I said, gradual steps towards freedom. New York, freeing the future children of slaves between 1799 and 1827. Then we have the 1800s. We have in 1800, the American citizens banned from investment and employment in the international slave trade. So that's when it all stopped for the slave trade. So the slaves that are already here, they were probably one of the last bunches of slaves that came over from Africa from the late 1700s to the early 1800s. Then you have Ohio, their state constitution abolishes slavery in 1802. New Jersey, 1804, slavery is abolished. 1806, Thomas Jefferson calls for the criminalization of the international slave trade, asking Congress to withdraw the citizens of the United States from all further participation in those violations of human rights, which morally, the reputation, and the best of our country have long been eager to prescribe. Yeah, because Thomas Jefferson did have slaves, but as right now, as people are doing the Black Lives Matter movement and like finally recognizing that we're human beings as well. Thomas Jefferson also did the same thing back in 1806, saying that we are human beings. We don't need to be slaves anymore. Let them be citizens. We also have, fast forward to 1820. History buffs know this one. The Compromise of 1820 banned slavery north of the 3630 line, which is the line which, if you look at a map of America, that is the line. Like you would have like North Carolina, Tennessee, and like part of Missouri, that line right there. That is the 3630 line to protect the commerce, all that stuff. It was the act to protect the commerce of the United States and punish the crime of piracy. And it was amended to consider the maritime slave trade as piracy, making it punishable by death. So if you were caught getting slaves from anywhere internationally on the water, it could be punishable by death. It's an act of treason against the country. So steps were being made. All right. We go fast forward from 1820. We're going to go to 1850. 1850. The Fugitive Slave Law of 1850. Oh boy. This is pretty much, actually the 1820s was the act for the 3630 line. That was the beginning of the North versus South conflict in 1820, in which 40 years later was one of the main reasons the Civil War happened. It was for keeping the slaves, or on the other side, abolishing slavery. Then we have the Fugitive Slave Law in 1850, which requires the return of escaped slaves to their owners, regardless of the state they're in. So if they escaped and they caught you, you got to go back. Like, gotcha. Got to go back to Georgia. Then we have the Dred Scott, of course, Dred Scott case, 1857. Rules that black slaves and their descendants cannot gain American citizenship, and that slaves are not entitled to freedom, even if they live in a free state for years. So even if you live in a free state, you can't be free as a black man or a man of color, basically, in this country, specifically black men. That was a step backwards in the lives of African Americans in this country. But then the first shot was fired, I guess you would say, in South Carolina, like I said earlier, and for the Civil War to start. And the Civil War lasted from 1861 to 1865. South lost, of course. But during the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, 1863. And then 1865, slaves were free. Now, slavery was a bad thing in American history. And people like to push it off as it's not part of American history, but it is. In classrooms and textbooks around the nation, just say that, oh, we had slaves for 2 pages and then move on to Teddy Roosevelt. Nah, bro. You got at least do 8 chapters on this. At least 8. Shoot, 10 at least. To see how people in this country treated African Americans. Slaves at the time. We weren't even called African Americans. We weren't even called Americans back then. We were called slaves. And it was legal. Remember that, folks. It was legal before 1865. So legal that after we were quote unquote free in 1865, there was another movement in the community. Um, we had the Jim Crow era. Now, if nobody knows what the Jim Crow era is, it's the era where the whites tried to impose power on black people after we were free to keep us from getting ahead in life, aka, i.e., white only water fountains, white only restaurants, white only businesses, white only streets, white only houses, white only neighborhoods, all that stuff. So then black people came with their own stuff. Black people fountains, black people neighborhoods, black people businesses, just to combat the stuff. Lynchings became huge during this time. And it was just bad it was good for African Americans, as in let's just be very, very clear. It was good that we were free, but we were still facing bad persecution and bad generalizations, bad prejudice against us. So we still had a lot to do after 1865 in Juneteenth. Then after that, we had the Civil Rights Movement. Fast forward to the 60s. Then we had stuff in the 90s that we had to go over, legislation from the country against black people. Fast forward to now, Black Lives Matter. We still got to tell people that Black Lives Matter. Now it's just blatant. Some people just know they're just doing this against black people, and it's sickening. It's sickening. But like I said, back in January of 1980, Juneteenth became an official state holiday in Texas. And now, in 2020, 40 years later, 47 states have deemed Juneteenth a state holiday. Now, I believe the only 3 states that don't do it, I believe it's both Dakotas and Hawaii. Let me see. Let me check. 3 states that don't recognize Juneteenth. Yep, it is Hawaii, North Dakota, and South Dakota. So, still making strides towards making Juneteenth a national holiday. And speaking of that, I talked about Al Edwards, the African American state legislator back in Texas in 1980. Now we have Senators Cory Booker and Senator Kamala Harris. Cory Booker is from New Jersey and Kamala Harris is from California. They have proposed a bill to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. So just like 4th of July is a federal holiday, people get like 8 million days off. Make Juneteenth a national holiday. Just like MLK Day, Thanksgiving, which is also a bad holiday. We'll get to that in another episode. Just make it nationally recognized that today is the day that African Americans can truly say that we are free. Freedom at last, right? Strides are being made as we speak in 2020. Black Lives Matter. People like to misconstrue the idea and say that all lives matter, which they do. All lives do matter. However, when it comes to this movement, we're just saying that Black Lives Matter because we're being killed on a daily basis. Not monthly, not yearly. We're going to bring it down to the small, the micro. We're being killed on a daily basis. And the ones we see on TV, those are the ones that the media wants us to see. My neighbor might get shot tomorrow from a police officer, quote unquote, trying to do his job. And they probably won't be put on TV. as the others that we see today. And that's sad. Like, we need to understand before I go on to my next segment of the show, we need to understand that from 1619 to 1865, we literally were slaves in this country legally. It was legal to treat Africans, African Americans, Latino Africans, Chinese, Japanese, indigenous peoples, Mexicans, Canadians, like trash. Treat them like garbage. Like Manifest Destiny was about wiping out the indigenous populations because they believed that the country needed to be theirs. Like God said that this land is ours, so we're going to take it. This is the dark history of this country. And while we're doing it, we're going to keep our slaves because they're going to work the fields for us as we move across this country. So 246 years of slavery in this country. Then we're going to go from 1865 to 1964, the Jim Crow years, 100 years of Jim Crow. And I'm going to stop right there and just give you guys a shocking, not really shocking, history lesson. 1865, Abraham Lincoln, I believe Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, right? Abraham Lincoln was pretty much a progressive president at the time. Let's put that into stuff right now. Barack Obama, progressive president. Abraham Lincoln, progressive president. Then we're going to rewind time by putting in Andrew Johnson, I believe, which was the complete antithesis of Abraham Lincoln. The country, specifically the North, was an outrage of Andrew Johnson. Sound familiar, folks? Does it sound familiar? Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves on paper. He freed the slaves. And then the next president was like, hey, slavery wasn't really that bad. Why not just, I can't really, reverse it, but we can treat them, lesser. That's what Andrew Johnson did, and a few presidents after that. Doesn't sound familiar. I'm going to be a president for the people. Yes, we can. Barack Obama. And then Trump just comes through and says, you know what? Let's make America great again. Let's go back to what it used to be. And I'm looking at this calendar right now. I don't really want to go back to what America used to be. That's not an option. That's not an option for African Americans. We don't want to go back to what it used to be. That's not an option for most minorities here in America, especially women. They don't want to go back to pre-1920 when they couldn't do anything. They couldn't vote. The only people that I think want to go back to how America was the indigenous peoples. When they were just here, this was their land before we came over here, blacks included. The sad thing about this whole thing is it's the white versus black thing, and the indigenous people are sitting right here on reservations in concentration camps. Like, what about us? That's the sad part about this, is that it's become a black and white thing. Yet the indigenous people that we took this land from, i.e. Americans, the white men, with us as their slaves. Now, I'm not saying that the black people were wrong for this, because we were taken from our land and forced to work for these people. But it's just sad that we have to go from 1619, pre-colonization, to colonization, to slavery, 246 years of that slavery, 1865 to where we were quote unquote free, to 1964 of Jim Crow, where we were treated like animals in the streets. We couldn't even be in the same regiment in the army as the white man until I believe it was 1941. That's just crazy. So we're at 1964, Civil Rights Movement. We finally get free, like equal voting rights in 1865. 100 years after we were free. That's crazy. Then after, this is the crazy part, then after we were given the voting rights, we were free, we were treated as equals, we got to go to the same schools as the white people. Guess what happened? Guess what happened, guys? Guess what happens? We were still barred away from the stuff that white people were given. We couldn't be in the same neighborhoods. We were still being brutalized by the police. Instead of us getting justice, the state legislators and the state senators, the city council members, the mayors that we put in power, they were giving us more laws against black people, people of color, mass incarcerations. That started in the 60s and 70s. That's why you see what neighborhoods look like today. It's because of those legislations. Redlining, which is before the 60s, but that kept black people out of white neighborhoods. And as black people moved to the big cities like Detroit, Chicago, Milwaukee, Minnesota, St. Louis, Cleveland, as they moved into those cities, because they used to be mostly all white, the white people moved. And the places where white people stayed, they wouldn't let black people in. They would not let black people in. That's redlining. And once they kept them in there, they would bring the property value of their stuff down to keep their schools underfunded, to keep the police underfunded, to make sure their schools look bad because they were poorly funded. That's to give them the notion that they weren't equal to the white guys. That's what happened starting in the 60s. And it's still going on today. I tell my friends and my family this right now. I mean, I know people are mad and furious that police are still killing black men, people of color. But those are pretty much the only ones you see on TV. You don't see the cop that killed a white man. You don't see the cop that killed a white woman. You don't see a cop that killed a Latino man. You don't see a cop that killed an Indian guy. You don't see that on TV. You never see it on TV. All you see is the ones who kill black people. And it makes us mad because we know that it's happening because we see it in our community. But now it's on TV more and more and more and more and more. That's making the country actually do something about it. We're having these marches, riots in the cities across America for justice. In 2020, let me give you guys a history lesson to tell you why I'm not that shocked that this is all happening again. I'm not that shocked because if you know your history, you already know what's going to happen next if the right strides and the right decisions aren't made in 2020. And this just isn't in the United States. We've seen Black Lives Matter movements around the world: Australia, England, France, Russia, China, New Zealand, Taiwan, Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, Portugal, Greece, Italy, Canada. This isn't just a United States thing. This is a global thing that's happening right now. The police brutality that's going on right now is going to ignite a flame for the next generation. The millennials right now are igniting a flame for our children, the next generation. My parents were the beginning, like the 70s and 80s and 90s. They were the first generation to know about the great things that black people have done for this country because it wasn't taught to my grandparents or their grandparents before them. They're the first generation of that. So the next generation, which is me, the 25-year-olds, the 30-year-olds, they're going to have to learn this stuff. We learned more stuff than our parents did in school about Black people. So it's our time. It's our turn to then teach our kids and the next generation, if you don't have kids, about what has happened in this country. You know what's sickening and sad is that people think this is the first time that people are going out and rioting in the streets for police brutality. Like I laugh at them. Like, this is not the first time. It's not the first time. Because remember, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, because it's 2020, 30 years ago, I think it was 1991, Rodney King gets pulled over. Police brutality. They keep on whacking his face, beating him, beating his back, and they keep just beating him on the street. The 4 officers get off. They get acquitted. None of them serve time initially, which pretty much sparked a whole riot in Los Angeles. Not only did the riot begin in South Central, it went to downtown. It went to parts of Beverly Hills. It even went to the beach. That's how big that riot was. It made, I think it was like $1.2 billion worth of damage. And it was like a turning point in American history that not just Black people were mad at this. White people also were mad at this. There was a change in what we were thinking. Yet 30 years later, we're still doing the same things. Even between 1991 and 2020, we had Michael Brown in 2015, Freddie Gray, Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, Walter Scott. You know, it's tiring. We're making strides to making sure we're just equal. We just want to be equal, guys. For the people who were saying, but what about all lives? No, Black lives matter. Once you guys understand that Black lives matter, we can make changes. Good stuff happen for all people, not just Blacks and whites, but for all people coming to this country, especially during this administration. It's gotten so bad out here for Black people that we can't go jogging. Ahmaud Arbery. We can't relax in the comfort of our own homes. We can't ask help after being in a car crash. We can't have a cell phone. We can't leave a party to get to safety. We can't play loud music. We can't sell CDs on the side. We can't sell loose cigarettes. We can't sleep. We can't walk to the corner store. We can't play cops and robbers anymore in the park in Cleveland. We can't go to church because we're afraid that a white person might come in and shoot us all up and then get taken out peacefully by police officers and get taken to Burger King. We can't even do that. We can't walk home with Skittles in Arizona. We can't hold a hairbrush while reaching for our freaking wallets. We can't party on New Year's. We can't even lawfully carry a weapon. Our Second Amendment rights. We can't even carry a weapon. We can't shop at Walmart. I think that was like a few weeks ago. We can't even shop at Walmart. We can't break down on a public road with car problems. We can't even have a disabled vehicle on the side of the road. We can't read a book in our own car. We can't decorate for a party. We can't even have a pool party in a nice neighborhood because the police are going to be called on us and then they're going to treat us like dirt and throw us around our front lawns. We can't cash out our checks in peace. We can't take out our wallets. We can't run from the police. We can't even breathe. We can't even live. We can't even be drunk in a Wendy's parking lot without being killed. So the Black Lives Matter movement should happen, and it should definitely happen during the Juneteenth celebrations, because we're still fighting for our freedoms today. A regular white person might see a cop come after him with the lights on and say, another ticket. Gosh darn it. Gotta tell Karen and the kids that I got another ticket. But me, on the other hand, if I see a cop coming after me, I'm like, shoot, this might be the last time I ever breathe. I better play my favorite song before they shoot me in the face. Now that's messed up. Very messed up. So when I look back on Black Lives Matter and Juneteenth, I like to think that America's going in the right direction and that our voices will be heard, because they should be. I believe when the movement started, 5 years ago, people didn't receive to it right. It was a split, a very like divisive hashtag. Because it was just black people saying it. And now 5 years later, after, of course, the whites have also gotten into it and people are boycotting businesses and stuff. It's crazy that the big institutions are saying Black Lives Matter now. They weren't saying it back in 2014, 2015. Just a thought. Because regardless of what they do, they don't really care about people, white or black. They just care about, like Wendy's, for instance. People want to boycott Wendy's. They don't really care about if you boycott them or not. They care about that $5 profit they get after you buy a double, a triple. They'll say anything they need to sell their burgers. After this is all over, they'll go back to what they were doing. And that's the sad thing. But you should still do your part if you want to boycott the big businesses of America, because our dollar matters to them. If we take that away, they'll have to do something. And they'll have to change their views on how they view us and all Americans going forward. So yeah, educational reform needs to happen. This needs to be taught in all schools, that June 19th, 1865 was the day that African Americans were free in this country. Then we also had the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments after that, which gave all people rights, quote unquote. I'm going to say that again, quote unquote. The 13th Amendment to the United States provided that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist in the United States. So and that happened after the Emancipation Proclamation. So they had the Emancipation Proclamation, quote unquote, freeing slaves, but there wasn't really a law in the Constitution that actually said that. So Juneteenth happened, and then they had an actual amendment that actually happened, the 13th Amendment, to help us out. Then you had the 14th Amendment, which granted all people born in the United States, including former slaves, equal protection, quote unquote, of the laws of the United States. That was ratified in 1868 during Andrew Johnson's administration. Then you have the 15th Amendment, granting African American men the right to vote, declaring that the rights of the citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on the account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Notice I said African American men, not women, because women were not given the right, all women weren't given the right to vote nationally until 1920 with the 19th Amendment. There were states that gave the right to vote to women before 1920, but nationwide, it wasn't given out until 1920. So we have Juneteenth, 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Then you had the Jim Crow era. Then you had the redlining era / generalization, prejudice era of the 60s and onward till now. Like I said, strides are being made to make sure that Juneteenth and equal rights to African Americans are still being made here in America. But until then, we must keep on fighting. You know, keep on getting those jobs that blacks weren't able to get back in the day. Keep being lawyers, become doctors, senators, representatives, president even. I'm even talking about the other jobs. We're talking about plumbers. We're talking about city planners. We're talking about recreational therapists. We're talking about graphic designers, caterers, package deliverers, athletes, software engineers, all right, automobile engineers, business owners, entrepreneurs. We got to keep doing this, all right, because our word matters, all right. But anyway, on a lighter note, because we got to keep this light for the last part of my show. Like I said, June 19th, 1865. Remember that date. June 19th, 1865. The oldest commemoration of the ending of slavery in the United States. We were free. We were free. And on January 1st, 1980, Texas made Juneteenth a state holiday. They made Juneteenth a state holiday. And Texas is one of the most pivotal, controversial states in the United States. And they made it the first thing. They made it their first state holiday. Of course, it became a state holiday in 1980. The day is also celebrated outside the United States, with organizations in a number of countries using the day to recognize the end of slavery and to celebrate the culture and achievements of African Americans in the country. So, time for my top 10 list. In honor of the 1980 commemoration, the state holiday of Juneteenth in America, the start of the wave that 47 other states have also taken into account for the freedom of African Americans, except for North Dakota, South Dakota, and Hawaii. We'll get to you soon. It's going to be a national holiday. Like I said, Cory Booker and Kamala Harris, as well as some other senators in the Senate, are proposing a bill to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. So look out for that, folks. We got to make your voice heard. If it's on the ballot, please vote for it. We just got to make our voices heard, y'all. Make our voices heard. So in honor of Juneteenth as an official holiday in 1980 in Texas, I'm going to share with you my top 10 songs from African Americans in the year 1980. So let's go with number 10 on the list. Joy and Pain by Frankie Beverly and Mays. Joy and pain, and like sunshine and rain. Then we got number 9, I'm Coming Out by Diana Ross. I'm coming out. I want the world to know. Got to let it show. All right, number 8. Happy Birthday by Stevie Wonder. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Then we got Give Me the Night by George Benson. Give me the night. Dun, dun, dun. All right. Give me the night. We got Just the Two of Us, number 6. Grover Washington Jr. and Bill Withers. Just the two of us. We can make it if we try. Just the two of us. We got number 5. Redemption Song by Bob Marley and the Wailers. Redemption Song. Redemption Song. We got Stomp, number 4 by Brothers Johnson. Everybody take it from the top. We're gonna stomp all night. We got number 3, Heartbreak Hotel by the Jacksons. This is Heartbreak Hotel. This is Heartbreak Hotel. Number 2, All I Do by Stevie Wonder. All I do is think about you. Now, before I get to my number 1, I'm going to do my honorable mentions. We have Love TKO by Teddy Pendergrass. We have The Breaks by Curtis Blow. And we have Take Your Time, Do It Right by the SOS Band. My number 1 song by African Americans from the year 1980 is Kool and the Gang, Celebration. Celebrate good times. Come on. Because we celebrated Juneteenth, June 19th, 1865. Now, I'm going to leave you with this. Juneteenth, June 19th, 1865, has a special place in African American lives in America. Just like Christmas is a holiday for Christians, just like July 4th is it means a lot to American nationalists who love the country. Just like St. Patrick's Day is for the Irish. And Chinese New Year is for the Chinese. All right? We have our own holiday. And it signifies the day that we were free. 47 states now recognize Juneteenth as a state holiday. We have to get the other 3 to recognize that as well. While doing that, we have to help the Senate and the representatives make Juneteenth a federal holiday, not just a state holiday. We need to make it a paid federal holiday for everyone, not just blacks, everyone. Because people need to know the history of our country. So 1980, first time Juneteenth was celebrated as a state holiday. And I gave you my top 10 songs from the 1980s. Actually, from the year 1980 by African Americans. Now, there were a lot of songs in 1980 by all races. But I wanted to give you guys the black songs from that year. Because African Americans have done a lot for this country. And we will continue to do more. Even when the country is against us, we will come through. We will teach our kids in the next generation what Juneteenth is, what Black Wall Street was, the Philadelphia bombings, the Tulsa massacre, what redlining was, Why some neighborhoods in urban areas look different than other urban areas. We're going to teach them that. And all people of all races should also teach their children what happened in America, so we can all come together and empathize, sympathize, not give generalizations. Don't be prejudiced. Don't ignore the facts that are slapped down in front of you on TV. Juneteenth, the end of slavery. That is what Juneteenth is all about. If you like this video and want to see more, please like, share, and subscribe. Click the notification button to get more videos. To understand that this video is the only video that I will do on Kris Corner talking about Juneteenth and racist policies and racist acts in this country. Click that notification button to get notifications of our next videos, not just Kris Corner. We got the Kris and Kris Show. We got the Great Debaters, the Only Amigos. We have tier list as well, where we rank stuff from least to greatest. And we also have behind the scenes stuff that we do on this channel. So click that notification button. Subscribe to the Kris Studios page on YouTube. Join the Kris Corner on Facebook. And of course, be nice to each other. Thank you.